Welcome everybody to the Damage Report here on a Fantastic Friday. I'm back. Did you miss me? Yes, I'm everywhere. John is still out. Some of you are like, John, please make peace in the Middle East. And I guarantee you when he comes back, war will stop. But for now, it's Brett Erlich and I who are just going to have different proxy wars here on the show. Even though we're not really gonna talk much about what's going on in Gaza, just the US ramifications of it. But Brett, how you doing on this fine Friday?
I'm doing well. Everything's good. I know there are many people scattered throughout the world that are clamoring for John to come home and fix it in some kind of, Deus ex machina situation. And that'll happen. And come, Lord Jonathan, come quickly.
I mean, remember when he went to the North Pole and climate change stopped?
Because he had his finger on the hole. He was like, "Just there's a leak. I gotta go. I got a show to come back into."
I think it was the beard. Once he grew out the beard, the ice caps were like, "Oh damn," and they just they literally refroze.
Yeah, John's beard. For those of you who have been around TYT long enough to remember John's insane, north of the wall wildling beard. It was oddly bright red and insane, and I miss it so dearly. Sometimes I sketch it like one of my French girls.
Yes, we stan John's beard. I'm surprised there isn't John's Beard Dragon out there. That name is up for grabs. But everybody, you know what to do on a Friday, all right? You like the stream, you send us your super chats. We're gonna read your comments in our social breaks. And thank you so much in advance, of course, for all the members of the Damage Report. Love you, thanks for your support. But we gotta get into some heavy stuff here in the United States. The gunman in Maine in the mass shooting, was responsible for the mass shooting, is still at large, having killed 18 people. The search is ongoing for Robert Card, 40 years old, who's facing an arrest warrant for 8 counts of murder. 8 because there are only 8 bodies confirmed, everybody. Once 18 people are identified, there will be 18 counts of murder. He should be considered armed and dangerous, police said. SWAT teams on Thursday conducted a search of the last known address associated with Card, law enforcement sources told CNN. Once the teams cleared the house, investigators came in to execute the search warrant, looking for items like computers, notes, weapons, and any evidence that might indicate a plan to carry out the shootings, the sources said. Here are some of the locations that they're searching. There's a map from the Times. The sort of where folks were initially, there were multiple sites, but one was a bar and grill called Schmengi's. And then another was a just-in-time recreation, which was a bowling alley. So 7 more people were killed there. A boat ramp in Lisbon was linked to a car that the suspect was found, belonging to the suspect, a suspect's home. Number 5, number 4 is a response boat was searching the river. So I mean, it is a massive search. Maine is a fairly, wooded area. It's not easy, and clearly seems to be a plan. The guy had a history of mental illness, but also was a firearms instructor. And so obviously a lot of folks are asking questions about gun safety laws in the state of Maine. But a little bit more about what happened. There's been a lockdown in the state as federal and state agencies are conducting this search. The shootings in Lewiston, which is a city about 40,000 residents, took place again at that bowling alley previously known as Spare Time Recreation, and Schmengi's bar and grill about 4 miles away. The police said 7 people died at the bowling alley, 8 at the bar, and 3 at the hospital. That's according to the Maine State Police. Again, 8 of the 18 have been identified. Here are some of the family members of the victims who spoke out.
Among the victims of Wednesday's shooting, 53-year-old Trisha Aslin, who was enjoying a night off with her sister Bobby at the local bowling alley. Her mom says she was shot trying to call 911.
Trisha didn't deserve that. Nobody did. The man that did that has no soul. I pray to God he doesn't do that to no more people. I hope they catch him soon.
Police say the gunman also went to Schmengi's Bar and Grill, where Joey Walker was a manager. His family says they waited an agonizing 14 hours before they learned he was among the 8 people who died there.
That moment when I got the call and said, Joey's dead, it brought me back. It brought me right back to my knees.
So another state, another community, more families impacted by senseless gun violence, as if any of it ever made sense. But it is the deadliest mass shooting this year, and the deadliest shooting in Maine. Brett, it is sort of this, like, as we've been focused on, foreign affairs and foreign policy, looking at Israel, Palestine, it's just sort of this like crude wake up call that this country has a lot of work to do ourselves. But your reactions?
It's sad that it feels like there's some things that everybody has to say. You don't know if you have to say it out loud. You feel compelled to say it, but you also feel, or I'll just speak for myself. I always feel like I'm just repeating from the same script when something like this happens. And it sucks because you can't change the script because the laws are still the same. The attitude toward guns in America is still the same. And, despite what most people in the United States voting populace would, believe and have the laws do to prevent people from getting guns, they'll just keep not changing them in Congress. And that's just super depressing. And then we all try to find like the updates. Hopefully they got the guy, but if they get this guy, they're going to get the next guy. How are they going to keep people from getting guns in the first place? If it is the case that this guy was actually a firearm instructor, then you're going to hear people on the Republican side come and say, well, how is your red flag or yellow flag law going to catch everybody? That's just the way it is in America. And that's devastating. And
yeah. And let's take you through that, because Brett pretty much just outlined the script of whatever happens after every mass shooting in this country. But interestingly, as you mentioned, the yellow flag law, Maine had what is called a yellow flag law, not a red flag law. This was according to the AP. It was different. Obviously, red flag laws cropping up in other states seize weapons from gun owners who are viewed as a threat. In a sign of the pro-Second Amendment mindset in Maine, however, a gun rights group helped write their law, and critics say that while it was a first step towards stronger safety measures, the state could save more lives by doing more, like passing a red flag law. I hope there isn't a orange flag law on the way to red. But so what is the yellow flag law? Well, it's kind of massive in terms of barriers to actually removing firearms from someone who could be dangerous. The law differs in that it requires police to first get a medical practitioner to evaluate the person and find them to be a threat before police can petition a judge in order to evaluate in order to order the person's firearms to be seized. Excuse me. The gun control advocates had criticized the law as ham-handed and unlikely to be used by families who don't want to traumatize a loved one by having them taken into custody. So it seems like it's a tall order, it's a tall task, and I don't know what else is going on in Maine. Maybe they've got tons of time on their hands. Maybe the cops can totally do this and and bring folks, get the medical practitioner, but seems like a long way to go. And I also feel like, Brett, that is interesting, where it's like oftentimes red flag laws are called by family, friends, people who are like, this person is unwell, this person, was like threatening to me. And sadly, a lot of those folks happen to end up being the victims of, gun violence because of that. But the whole point is like to try and use these laws that will, for lack of a better term, like bring this person in, remove their gun in sort of the least traumatizing or upsetting or sort of like way that could literally trigger them to do something like this. So
yeah, and then specifically the Northeast states like Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, there is this attitude toward guns. And like I've hung out with folks in Vermont where they essentially, it's just you try to parse out their political beliefs into like what is typically, for me from California, what I know to be like someone who typically votes Democrat versus someone who votes Republican. But these dudes are like, no, we love guns. We smoke a lot of weed, and that's just kind of life for us. And that's it's the don't tread on me. It's more of a kind of let live unless you're hurting somebody, and then I will mow you down kind of thing. But yeah, and so it's hard to get these kinds of these laws passed in a state that prides itself on that, and it's which makes it harder than a state that doesn't.
Yeah, and it's woodsy, so a lot of hunting. It was one of the reasons why Bernie in Vermont was sort of like slower on the gun control and gun reform, piece of his political plank, and maybe a little sleepy. Stephen King is like the biggest thing that happens in Maine, and those are all made up stories. I mean, as we think they're made up, who knows? Pennywise is still out there. But President Biden immediately tweeted, "Enough. I urge Republican lawmakers in Congress to fulfill their duty to protect the American people, work with us to pass common sense gun reforms. This is the very least we owe every American who will now bear the scars, physical and mental, of this latest attack in Maine." I wish he would be a little bit more specific, in terms of these like high-powered magazine rifles. That would be great. But the biggest news, I think, in all of this, everything feels sort of rehearsed, the same. But the biggest news is actually a representative named Jared Golden, who is from the town in which this shooting took place, from Lewiston, Maine, who previously voted against, an assault weapons ban in Congress. And now that representative is changing his tune. Take a listen to what he's saying now.
I have opposed efforts to ban deadly weapons of war like the assault rifle used to carry out this crime. The time has now come for me to take responsibility for this failure, which is why I now call on the United States Congress to ban assault rifles like the one used by the sick perpetrator of this mass killing in my hometown of Lewiston, Maine. For the good of my community, I will work with any colleague to get this done in the time that I have left in Congress. To the people of Lewiston, my constituents throughout the 2nd District, to the families who lost loved ones, and to those who have been harmed, I ask for forgiveness and support as I seek to put an end to these terrible shootings.
So that's huge to me. I mean, a little late given that there are 18 people who lost their lives in this mass shooting. But Brett, you don't usually hear that 180 after these kinds of shootings. It had to happen in his town for him to change his tune. But I mean, how long does this hold, right? Before the NRA gets a hold of him and nothing goes anywhere?
The NRA gets a hold of folks, and then the representative gets to get away with it as long as there's not an activity like this or an incident like this in their town. That's just kind of how it works. And this guy's going to get a pass. They get hall passes in Congress all the time and in state houses all the time to be like, yeah, we know you had a big mass shooting in your neighborhood, so I know that you're still on our side or not. The other thing is, like, in these situations, there's like that, when you say rehearse, everybody says like, oh, it took you to have a daughter to understand women's issues. Right. But like, we had an assault weapons ban. We had one. It was banned. The folks who are arguing against an assault weapons ban are arguing against it like if we had one, the entire nation would disintegrate and we'd get invaded by, like, I don't know, Mexico and Iran at the same time. Mm-hmm. But we had one and we weren't invaded. And I also can prove to you that it worked better than what we have now, because we have more we have more mass shootings on a higher scale with more deaths than we did when we had an assault weapons ban. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, but that's just a fact.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that when you and I were in, middle school and high school, there weren't the degree to, of mass shootings that there were. We didn't do those drills, and Columbine happened after, I believe, we were out of school. But it is interesting. I mean, like, for the legacy that I think she squandered, Dianne Feinstein's, one of her major pieces of her legacy was passing that assault weapons ban. And that came on the back of 34 children being shot in Stockton in 1989 at a school. So again, there's good reason for this, and you're totally right. We were just as militaristic in the 90s and early aughts. America defended itself. Everything was fine. This is obviously just, another addition to a number of mass shootings. We showed this graphic yesterday, gun violence since 2013. this is according to the Gun Violence Archive. Number of mass shootings, 566. Mass murders, 32. So I believe mass murders must be with a different weapon. And overall look at guns in America. How many mass killings are there in the US? High profile public shootings are only a portion of the nation's mass killings since 2006. So the mass killings get the headlines, but there have been, other gun violence deaths, whatnot, and on and on and on. Most mass killings, however, are committed using handguns, which is interesting because a lot of gun rights folks will bring that up whenever you talk about like the AR-15, right, and whatnot. It's like, a lot of handguns are also used in this. I think it is across the board, but the scale, like the amount that we're seeing, the amount of lives that can be taken in one moment, in one instant, 8 lives in 10 seconds or whatever it is, that is only because of these high-powered weapons. Should we turn to this ridiculous reaction from Jesse Waters? So, look, there's been some good movement. There's also been some terrible movement. Obviously, Republicans are going back to their playbook when it comes to the discussion around gun control. Here is newly elected Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson's reaction to this Maine mass shooting.
This happens with almost every shooting incident. The immediate call by the left in this country, we need more gun laws, we need more legislation. What's your answer to that?
At the end of the day, the problem is the human heart. It's not guns, it's not the weapons. At the end of the day, we have to protect the right of the citizens to protect themselves, and that's the Second Amendment. And that's why our party stands so strongly for that.
You talk about the human heart. If somebody really wants to kill innocent people, there's a lot of ways they can do it beyond using a gun. I'm sure this will become a bigger issue throughout the days moving forward. Is there any specific gun law that you would look at, or any new legislation you would look at?
Well, been on the job for 48 hours. We'll see. I mean, there'll be lots of discussion, as there are after these heartbreaking tragedies. But your point is well taken. I mean, in Europe and in other places, they use vehicles to mow down crowds at parades, where they've done that here in the United States. It's not the weapon, it's the underlying problem.
Which is, it's just, like, again, what do you expect? I mean, I almost give Sean Hannity credit for even bringing up the fact that there was, that 18 people died in this, or were killed in this mass shooting. But there you go, Mike Johnson, who truly looks like an AI version of like House of Cards Kevin Spacey, like that. Like, doesn't he look like, draw Frank Underwood from memory, but as like a 45-year-old or whatever? Anyway.
So I'll see your Netflix and I'll raise you an HBO. I don't know if everybody watched True Blood, but there was this guy, this dude right here, who was the guy who was like the televangelist, who in front of the cameras was like a total normie, and or just like, hey, I'm here to be good and wholesome in the face of these vampire murderers. But behind the scenes, he was a totally depraved maniac.
I love that.
That's it.
Yes.
Now he does like car commercials, but the dude, but like, that's what this guy is. He is the scariest looking dude in all of Congress. And then when you go back in time and you look at like all the little moments from, Jim Jordan walking the halls, and you got Kevin McCarthy just kind of out there. And in the background, there's this weirdo.
Right. He's the Forrest Gump of the GOP. He's kind of always around.
Yeah, here's Steve Scalise saying 37 days of Soviet style impeachment, and there's this dude in the background, and I noticed him. I'm like, who is that? Central casting guy whose job it is to relocate pedophile priests to other parishes outside his neighborhood.
Yes. Also, what's his skin routine?
He's unicorn baby blood. Like, if you want to find, patient zero for the adrenochrome craze, that's this dude.
Did I already tease the Jesse Waters
You
bit?
did.
Oh, damn it. Okay, let's watch this. Piers Morgan, honestly, has kind of been crushing it lately. He had a very long sort of plea to his fellow Fox News hosts. He was like, look, there is something we can do. This doesn't happen in the UK. It is gun control. And it was this very thoughtful moment from Piers, who like clearly does care about Americans' lives. And this is how Jesse Waters responded to him.
You can't keep having the Groundhog Day of these people with these semi-automatic rifles going into civilian areas and gunning people to pieces. Can you?
As your friend.
Yeah.
Respectfully.
Of course.
We have these guns because of you. Because of your country.
I know.
Because of your king.
I know.
And we haven't had that problem with the king since then.
I know.
With respect, as your friend.
Respectfully, here's my response. I cannot buy in the United States of America a Kinder Surprise chocolate egg. They're banned. They're banned on safety grounds because the little toys inside them might choke people. You're a country of many freedoms and many regulations. How about regulating guns in the way that you do Kinder Surprise chocolate eggs?
Okay. With respect, do forks make people fat?
Yeah.
Okay. No.
Well, they do. They do, don't they?
Guns don't kill people.
They do.
People kill people.
Guns also
Forks
kill people.
don't make you fat.
Insane.
Except like the corollary there would be like, but people who eat their food from the fire hose, the fire hose people are morbidly obese and probably should seek help. Like that's the equivalent if like suddenly there was just like a group of people who were like, instead of eating it, I just I just mash all the donuts up and just fire hose it into my mouth. Or like into my butt. Like, and then we'd be like, ooh, that seems really dangerous to you and other people. Maybe it's not food.
And we don't give forks to psychopaths either. They get like very soft implements. We know people who are risks of murder. We don't let forks onto planes. Like we don't do that. Everything's handheld food except for first class.
First class, man.
But that's how it works, right? Like,
yeah,
you get like,
so stupid. And
we absolutely have common sense regulations in situations where more people get killed. And again, I'll point out we had one in place. It was an assault weapons ban, and fewer people died.
Indeed. All right, let's take our first break. We will be RB after this. Anyway, he is also like Greg Gutfeld, which is like as soon as they veer into a little bit serious and honest territory, he brings it back with the most asinine comment, and everyone kind of laughs and is like, yeah. Anyway, this is a fun one, guys. So House Republicans have had a new speaker, Mike Johnson, for a total of 48 hours, and they are already beginning to turn on him for a pretty disgusting reason that we're gonna get into, specifically for his thoughts on the George Floyd murder in 2020. Matt Walsh kicked it off. He tweeted out a clip of Mike Johnson at the time, who was asked about the police killing of George Floyd, to which he had a pretty human response. Here's what he said.
What did you feel when you watched the video of George Floyd being killed?
I was outraged. I don't think anyone can view the video and objectively come to any other conclusion but that it was an act of murder. And I felt that initially, as everyone did. It's so disturbing. And, the underlying issues beneath that are something that the country is now struggling with. And I think it's something we have to look at very soberly and with a lot of empathy. And I'm glad to see that's happening.
Wow, ew, empathy, sobriety, disgusting. Okay, so yeah, that's actually an incredibly honest and real, and I think everyone felt that way, answer after the murder of George Floyd. Part of this might be because Mike Johnson has an adopted black son. He has 2 biological children as well who are white, and he actually spoke a little bit more about the differences between his kids.
I've thought often through all these ordeals over the last couple of weeks about the difference in the experiences between my two 14-year-old sons, Michael being a Black American and Jack being white, Caucasian. They have different challenges. My son Jack has an easier path. He just does. The interesting thing about both of these kids, Michael and Jack, is they're both handsome, articulate, really talented kids, gifted by God to do lots of things. But the reality is, and no one can tell me otherwise, my son Michael had a harder time than my son Jack is going to have simply because of the color of his skin. And that's a reality. It's an uncomfortable, painful one to acknowledge, but people have to recognize that's a fact.
All right, we need to stop this before I start to kind of like Mike Johnson for, recognizing structural racism, seeing it in front of him, having some sort of empathy for his son who, yes, will face different adversity than his white son. But of course, Matt Walsh is sounding the alarm on this, and he tweeted that clip out saying, here's the new speaker saying George Floyd was murdered and we need systemic changes to fix the racism in our country. Struggling to see why we had to kick out the last guy for this guy. It's the exact same guy pretty much. And then Laura Loomer, who I'm convinced is just an Instagram filter, tweeted, Magic Mike's loves drug addict George Floyd. My God, how people still say this about, you're such a ghoul. You're such a ghoul. Turns out there's no difference between Magic Mike and Big Mike. Is he an undercover? So wait, Big Mike? Who's Big Mike?
Big. All I think of as Big Mike is Blindside.
Oh,
Mike
yeah.
McCarthy.
Is that what he's saying? Oh, because he.
Or no, Mike McCarthy's. I went into sports. I went too deep into sports. I don't know. Big Mike.
Anyway, is he an undercover Democrat? What type of MAGA Republican says something like that? George Floyd was a drug addict and a criminal. Yet the new Speaker of the House said his heart broke for George Floyd. I'm really MAGA. You know who my heart breaks for? Derek Chauvin. Pew pew pew. Side with the murderer. And then of course you've got other folks saying, Pedro Gonzalez saying, sure, the new GOP House Speaker has completely internalized left-wing racial libel about white supremacy and privilege. He also supports foreign aid, but okay. But he supports Trump, so it's fine. It's a win. So people are basically like, McCarthy was better or McCarthy was the same. What did McCarthy actually say about George Floyd at the time? Let's take a look. This was his tweet. George Floyd should still be alive today. We can honor his memory by healing our broken communities, by mending racial divides, and by rebuilding America into a more perfect union that we know it should be. Ripping a city and a country apart only deepens the wound. You stupid uppity activists, go back home, go back inside. We've got this. And when I got this, we will do nothing. So I just think this is so interesting, Brett. And I'm sure that Mike Johnson isn't gonna come out and sort of stand by his old comments. He's trying to play this role. I don't think it's gonna stick. I don't think people really care, especially after the amount of dysfunction, but the reach on this is so gross.
I don't think anyone's going to address it that isn't in the Laura Loomer slime pit.
Yeah.
They're just going to cruise right past it. They're going to see, this is a Matt Walsh, mic check, so to speak, where he's just like, can anyone hear me? And he's seeing if this works. He knows the people in his basement can hear him, but he's trying to get this. But what what in choosing Mike Johnson for the speakership, they really have figured out the perfect thing to do. Just because, the central casting aspect of this dude, it just never. Every time I look at him, I just think this is exactly who the Republicans kind of always have been: a smooth talking, God loves you, and I'm going to try to champion you. The kind of things that Ted Cruz tries to do, but always comes off as a real slime ball. This guy genuinely just kind of is able to glide around and communicate to people.
Yeah.
And they see it. And the flip side of the coin of what he's talking about with his own son is this guy is the apex of the other side. This is with his floopy hairdo and his glasses. He is exactly that smoke-filled room. Everybody, he doesn't really talk about his feelings, but then he goes and does probably something wildly depraved behind the scenes. That's just the vibe I get off this dude.
I'm getting big, like weird, like congressional orgy that we can't speak about vibes from him.
He's the guy that invited Matt Gaetz.
He invited Matt Gaetz. He invited what's his name that we don't talk about anymore because he
Madison Cawthorn.
Yes.
Here's for him. I just hear him say, like, it's going to be a lot more difficult for my black child than it is for my white child in my own house because I am wildly racist.
Yeah. Oh God, I feel like this won't be the last we'll hear of his son. I mean, that's the thing. If he had any, I hope he leaves his black son out of this, but I sort of feel like he will probably use him as a crutch and as a talking point going forward. But TBD. There's more though. Let's get into this. Now that the House is back in session, you know what that means. We're going to get things done. No, we're gonna do political theater, guys. That's what we're gonna do. And that is what Republicans are really, really good at. And so they are poised to vote next week on a resolution that censures a colleague, Representative Rashida Tlaib, for her criticism of Israel's actions in the war on Gaza. The censure motion was introduced by, you'll never guess. Just guess. Who's calling this anti-Semitic? Marjorie Taylor Greene. My God, you couldn't have scripted it. Marjorie Taylor Greene is the one who's introducing the motion to censure her colleague on Thursday in this so-called privilege motion, which means it has to be put to a vote by next week. Speaker Mike Johnson's office did not immediately say when the vote will be scheduled. What does it allege? It alleges that Tlaib, this is rich, led an insurrection at the United States Capitol complex for speaking to protesters advocating for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war outside of an House office building last week. It also accuses Tlaib of anti-Semitic activity and sympathizing with terrorist organizations for her anti-Israel comments dating back to 2019, including her recent criticism of US military aid to Israel. I sort of take umbrage with the anti-Israel comments. It's like, just say her critique of military aid to Israel. Like, anyway, but the point is, Brett, this was all about the, and we started off the week like this, but the massive demonstrations that have been going on last week and then this week, led by progressive Jews who are saying, not in my name, basically, please ceasefire. We do not want to see more dead in this conflict. And Marjorie Taylor Greene freaks out and is basically like, this is an insurrection. Take a look. I don't think we showed this yet. Here it is.
Just finished with our meetings here at the White House this afternoon. We had a great planning session for our January 6th objection. We aren't going to let this election be stolen by Joe Biden and the Democrats. President Trump won by a landslide. Call your House reps, call your senators from your states. We've got to make sure they're on board, and we already have a lot of people engaged.
Sorry, y'all, it's been a long week. That wasn't the clip that I was teeing up, but that's okay. We don't have that. But she was basically like, this is an insurrection. But there she is, arguing and asking people to call their reps about what? About the 2020 election that was supposedly stolen, was not stolen. Something happened on January 6th, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Rashida Tlaib did respond to this motion to censure her. She wrote, Marjorie Taylor Greene's unhinged resolution is deeply Islamophobic and attacks peaceful Jewish anti-war advocates. I'm proud to stand in solidarity with Jewish peace activists calling for a ceasefire and an end to the violence. I will not be bullied. I will not be dehumanized, and I'll not be silenced. No, and then I'm just going to skip to no child has to suffer or live in fear of violence. I do just want to remind everyone, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the irony that she is bringing this resolution and saying that Rashida Tlaib is anti-Semitic. Marjorie Taylor Greene herself has a very interesting history with, just brushing over the Holocaust, using the Holocaust as like a comparison with everything, comparing people who wear masks to Jews persecuted and killed in the Holocaust. You might remember this in an interview. She said, we can look back in time in history when people were told to wear a gold star and they were definitely treated like second-class citizens, so much so they were put in trains and taken to gas chambers in Nazi Germany. And this is exactly the type of abuse that Nancy Pelosi is talking about. So that was about mask mandates back in 2021. And then also there's this gem that on Facebook, this is before she was elected, but she wrote, Rothschild Incorporated international investment banking firm was involved in the California wildfires, which were, in this telling, caused by a beam from a space solar generator. And then she has spoken at Nick Fuentes' AFPAC, right? Which America First PAC, I think that's what it is. I get that confused with like the insurance company. There she is.
AFPAC.
AFPAC. And you have to like, do a little goose step. It's literally it's the goose step. She says she regrets that, Brett, but it's just so funny. It's like, and that's how you know that some of these things, some of these cries, this is what I will say, my opinion, that some of the calls of anti-Semitism, when you're specifically talking about just calling for a ceasefire, are being levied by the worst people like Marjorie Greene, who have literally no leg to stand on.
Yeah, similarities aren't sameness, but I will say that like, I always wonder what we can learn from Marjorie Taylor Greene. And what I hope everyone can learn is to differentiate between Israel and Jewish people as expertly as people on the right who are like, I love Israel. I love it. I love everything it does, particularly its right-wing prime minister. But I hate Jewish people that. They're able to distinguish it. It's wildly misguided. But they are able to tell the difference between the people who run a government and the people who follow a religion. And I want to encourage that instinct. I would hope that people she views people as like Rashida Tlaib, who are like encouraging a ceasefire and trying to find other like-minded people to do discourse that affects American policy. I think that entire dynamic is kind of healthy, and kind of how the Constitution that Marjorie Taylor Greene says that she supports was designed. And hopefully representatives find people to have like-minded voices and they represent a certain voice, as opposed to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who says every dumb thing that pops into her mind and will go to any place that invites her because she just loves to see her face on camera, even if the cameras are paid for by literal neo-Nazis.
Yeah. Absolutely. I did just want to say before we break that I love this move because in response, Vermont Representative Becca Balint has actually introduced a measure to censure Marjorie Taylor Greene. And you don't always see that, especially when other members of Congress, especially, Muslim members of Congress, Rashida Tlaib is one of the first Muslim members of Congress in our history. And it's nice that someone like Representative Balint is like, no. You know who needs to be censured? Marjorie Greene, for all of the things that she's done and said, including actual anti-Semitism.
I haven't outspoken. Become a member and you will actually get to hear what we're talking about when we come out of break.
Welcome back to the Damage Report. Francesca Fiorentini and Brett Erlich. Thank you so much. Everybody, listen to the Bitchuation Room podcast. That's my show if you like me. And if not, don't. Cool. All right, let's go. In a weird, desperate bid to remain relevant, Ron DeSantis is apparently trying to play commander-in-chief by sending weapons to Israel as the state of Florida. What? That's right. Ron DeSantis said Thursday that he arranged to send drones, weapons, and ammunition to Israel as it prepares for an incursion of Gaza in response to Hamas's attack. Florida has sent cargo planes with healthcare supplies, drones, body armor, and helmets, said Jeremy Redfern, a spokesperson for the governor's office. The state also worked with groups to supply unspecified amounts of weapons and ammunition that were privately funded. Now, there's a lot of whoa, what? Can they do that? The governor's office said it had been coordinating with the Israeli consul general in Florida. And then the consul was like, yeah, but there's no weapons. So it's not really clear whether there are or are not. But it is kind of a kind of a PR stunt. Here's a little bit of footage I wanted to show you that the governor's office released this to show what they are bringing or sending to Israel. So there's a box with a sign that says "For Israel." They're loading a cargo ship. There's sort of like sweeping camera movements happening. It's like pretty good footage, and so it's clear that there's it's a PR move. Maybe we'll get into why.
Looks like a Home Depot commercial. Or a FedEx commercial. We're logistics specialists.
Yeah, exactly. But so this move, he like hits the "For Israel" a little too hard for me, that I'm like, nah, you're kind of drawing attention. Like I feel, anyway, so this is the move, I guess. And John Kirby, who's a spokesperson for the White House, said, quote, "It's not illegal for the governor of a state to offer a measure of foreign assistance to another country, but there are laws and regulations which govern how the export process is handled, and that's all done through commerce. I couldn't speak with authority today about whether the governor has checked all those boxes or not." Yeah, no, see, John, I'm gonna save it for you. He didn't check those boxes. Pretty sure Governor Ron DeSantis didn't check those boxes. However, just so you know, if you do want to send military equipment, that typically requires a license or some authorization from either the Commerce or State Department, depending on the precise item. A foreign policy advisor, Thomas Kruger, said he specializes in international trade. Apparently, Democrats are not happy about this move. This is actually from Florida Democratic Chair Nikki Fried, who's Jewish, slamming DeSantis for his assistance in trying to get ammunition and weapons to Israel, saying Biden is the commander in chief. Quote, "The Florida Democratic Party unequivocally supports Israel's right to self-defense, and American military support for those efforts must come from the US government, not a handshake deal between a wannabe president and undefined private parties," Fried said in a statement. Instead of meddling with military operations to score political points for his failing presidential campaign, Ron needs to stand down and let President Biden do his job. And Biden's doing, like, in terms of arming Israel, pretty good job defending Israel, denying the number of casualties on the Palestinian side. Brett, before I kick it to you, it's important to know this weekend, there is a massive Republican Jewish coalition meeting in Las Vegas. So DeSantis is speaking at this meeting. I can only assume, as we know, that his funders have been jumping ship. So maybe this is a sort of weird Hail Mary of like, I'm sending some weapons. They're homemade, but they're there. You know, like it's a weird move.
There's in the movie Starship Troopers, there's a part where the kid's like, "I'm doing my part," and he's like just painting guns or something. That's what he's doing. Ron DeSantis, do you want to get, like, it seems like he wants to get in some kind of contest with Joe Biden.
Right.
Joe Biden, who is the commander in chief of the US military, the president of the United States. And unless you, Ron DeSantis, are sending $3.3 billion in arms a year to Israel, $500 million for missile defense, you're gonna lose this contest. Like, you're not going to send more to help Israel, according to your own narrative, than Joe Biden is. This is so stupid. And you're not gonna send, and you're not gonna do more, quote, for the state of Israel than Donald Trump did. Well, you look like a tool spank, my buddy doll, going, "I could help out a lot." It is so pathetic. It's such a please clap. It is also insulting to pretty much everybody who is paying attention to this, that this is how you're going to contribute. And dear my fellow Republican voters, because I'm a Republican from Florida, I just want to tell you, they're shipping your guns overseas.
Yep.
They're making you less safe. We need that to save us from the Venezuelans or the Mexicans or whoever we hate today. How dare he?
Indeed. It's, you know what though? And this is the only nice thing I'm going to say about Ron DeSantis. At least he tries in these performative things. Like for all the talk that Governor Newsom does, like, I'm the anti-Ron DeSantis, send aid to Palestine, send aid to Gaza right now. Like, I don't know. No one's gonna do that, obviously. I understand the country we live in. But I'm like, then do something. Don't just like be on like a talk and be like, I think it's wrong. Like, I don't know. Try your own thing. Do your own thing to counter it. Do a stunt. Do a stunt. Anyway, let's move on to, oh man. Representative Lauren Boebert is facing a real tough re-election that only got even tougher. This is not just from the Democratic side. Again, she narrowly won against Democrat Adam Frisch. But now there is a primary Republican challenger. And this is all because of Beetlejuice Gate or Date Gate or something else that I haven't thought of. Brett, I don't know, like Grope Gate, Vape Gate. There's a lot of different gates that could be going on, but
cinephiles.
Yeah. Ooh, cinephiles. Yeah, I like that. It's just the sloppiness from being real sloppy. And there's a new challenger in the GOP again for her seat, and that is a man named Jeff Hurd. And Jeff Hurd just recently got the endorsement of Colorado Governor Bill Owens. So that's massive. Owens wrote, I am proud to endorse Jeff Hurd for US Congress for the 3rd District. Jeff is a man of character. He's hardworking, smart, sincere, and he'll deliver for the district. This is obviously like, it's because of the stuff that happened with Beetlejuice at the Beetlejuice show. Republican officials have announced their support for Hurd. Several of them citing that incident with Boebert, saying, just after the Congresswoman's issues at the theater, I just decided that we had to do something different, said Delta County Commissioner Don Soups, who knew of Hurd, but didn't know him personally before endorsing him this month. So I started reaching out and trying to make sure that we had the right person in that seat for the next election. I mean, can't a girl, if this were a man, all right, I stan a sloppy queen. No, not at all. We knew this was coming, guys. But I also think, Brett, it's interesting that like, even for the GOP, I guess there are lines, and I guess those lines depend on who. I mean, look, Matt Schlapp, how many, staffers has he harassed? And that dude's still like the head of CPAC. But when it comes to Boebert and this just kind of like such an egregious instance, it's like, no, they're gonna jump ship.
Boebert is going to potentially lose her reelection bid. That's your decoder ring. There's plenty of horrible people who have done horrible things in Congress and they still get to stick around. And there's 3 reasons they get to stick around. 1, they raise money. 2, they win. And 3, they're friendly. Yeah. And Lauren Boebert is none of those things. I bet Matt Gaetz is super fun to hang out with. That, and he's going to win his reelection bids because he's 2nd generation political operative in that area.
That's what it is.
That's it. Like, those are the 2 things that are going to keep him around, and he is able to raise his own funds without super PAC money. So why the hell would he do any? He's coming out against super PAC. He's going to be sticking around. But Lauren Boebert is not long for this world, and this is basically people saying like, I'm going to try to find another horse from Rifle, Colorado, and that's funny. I do like Beat It Juice or something. Beat It Juice. Thank you, Jonathan. For that, but Lauren Boebert, I don't know. I welcome her too. I think this is unfair to do to Lauren Boebert. Lauren, I think your side's treating you poorly. All you need to do is just switch your policies up and you get to go on living your lifestyle.
Honestly.
Come to this side, bruh.
I mean, she's so close. You know, she talked about like not being able to afford her birth control once, and then I had a family. Oops. I mean, she's been in an abusive relationship. She talked about one time being on food stamps. Like, this is the whole thing. But like, there's no clout, there's no money, there's no like, razzle dazzle to be like, for the right kinds of policies that everyone's, there's already an AOC, and Lauren Boebert's really trying to be AOC and she just can't get there. So, look, guys, there's like, Hurd's already raising basically as much money as Boebert, half as much money as Boebert has. And even though he just entered the race, Adam Frisch, the Democratic side, again, the guy is definitely a force. Even if Hurd beats out Boebert, Adam Frisch may flip this district. He's raised $3.4 million in the 3rd quarter of this year. So we will see what happens. But I don't think it's going to be Boebert. I think we're looking at the next OAN host.
the cost. Madison Cawthorn Redux, just a little too embarrassing, a little too much, and alienated the wrong person in your party without having the power to back it up.
For sure. All right, guys, that does it for the hour. If you're on linear, thank you for tuning in. And if not, we will be on YouTube for the aftermath. Be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.